Applied in the service of humanity, AI has incredible promise, but applied in the service of empire in the permanent war state, it spells disaster. The focus on AI is part of what is known as the third offset strategy. This is a military strategy that seeks to offset advances in military technology by Russia and China in order to maintain US global military superiority, thus ensuring no country can challenge US imperialism. The third offset is the latest iteration of the strategy the US used to dominate the globe throughout the Cold War. A few years after World War II, Washington implemented the first offset strategy and developed a massive nuclear arsenal. This sparked an arms race with the Soviet Union that nearly led to all-out nuclear war. The second offset began in the 1970s when the Soviet Union had achieved parity in nuclear weapons. The US began developing an arsenal of long-range precision-guided bombs and stealth technology. Now, Russia and China have caught up to the US in conventional military might. So in 2014, soon after the Obama administration's pivot to Asia began, the US announced the formation of the third offset strategy.
Today, I'm announcing a new defense innovation initiative, an initiative that we expect to develop into a game-changing third offset strategy. This new initiative is an ambitious, department-wide effort to identify and invest in innovative ways to sustain and advance America's military dominance for the 21st century.
Then Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel's speech included the announcement of a Pentagon office in Silicon Valley called the Defense Innovation Unit. This has since expanded to have offices in Austin, Texas, Boston, Massachusetts, and at the Pentagon itself. In April 2015, Hagel's replacement, Ash Carter, gave a landmark speech to Silicon Valley CEOs at Stanford University, urging them to enlist in the new arms race.
This is a serious business. It's a serious matter, and it requires our collaboration. But in addition to dangers, there are great opportunities to be seized through a new level of partnership between the Pentagon and Silicon Valley, opportunities that we can only realize together.
Carter gently reminded his audience that the Silicon Valley giants owe their existence to the Pentagon and CIA.
Consider the historic role that DoD and government investments have played in helping spur ground-up technology innovation, both in this valley and on this campus. Most technologies used throughout Silicon Valley, including many that Apple brilliantly integrated into the iPhone, can be traced back to government or DoD research and expenditures. Developers of Multitouch worked together through a fellowship funded by the National Science Foundation and the CIA. The government helped ignite the spark, but this was the place that nurtured the flame, that created incredible applications. I mention this because it speaks to a partnership that has long existed between America's technology sector and its government and defense institutions, a relationship that can continue in a way that benefits us both.
The key figure merging Silicon Valley and the Pentagon is former Google CEO Eric Schmidt. As soon as the pivot to Asia began, Schmidt was meeting with Pentagon officials. In 2016, he was named head of the newly formed Defense Innovation Board to advise the Pentagon. Schmidt toured some 100 US military bases and installations around the world, advising them on how to use technology to increase their lethality. The third offset strategy in the AI arms race continued through the Trump era, its principles delineated in the 2018 National Defense Strategy that officially announced the end of the so-called war on terror and returned to Cold War politics, euphemistically deemed interstate strategic competition. Trump's Pentagon chief touted AI developments in September 2020.
In today's era of great power competition, as new technologies alter the character of warfare, we must stay ahead of our near-peer rivals, namely China and Russia. Artificial intelligence is in a league of its own, with the potential to transform nearly every aspect of the battlefield.
Eric Schmidt was then appointed to head the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence, a body created to advise the government on AI development.
If Chinese technology were to dominate the globe with non-American values, it would really hurt us.
Schmidt's deputy at the NSCAI is Robert Work, a former Pentagon official.
Look, the Department of Defense is one of the biggest corporations on the planet.
The Pentagon is a corporation. Therefore, its goal is to generate profit, in its case, through war. And what better way to make huge amounts of money than ramping up fear of a foreign threat? The NSCAI's February 2021 report says that in the future, warfare will pit algorithm against algorithm. In other words, Schmidt and the Pentagon are seeking to create hyper-advanced connected systems of autonomous weapons that will make battlefield decisions at speeds exponentially faster than the human brain can understand. It also calls for AI to be used against, quote, foreign and domestic terrorists operating within our borders. This raises major concerns about further encroachment of the US surveillance state. Meanwhile, Schmidt is positioning himself to make hefty sums off of what he's advocating. According to a report in The Prospect, as a venture capitalist, Schmidt has invested millions of dollars in more than half a dozen national security startups that sell those very technologies back to the government. Even though the US military budget is already around 3 times larger than China's, the AI arms race has been used to justify the largest Pentagon research and development budget in history. Biden's DoD budget request for the year 2022 includes $112 billion for R&D. The third offset strategy is a bipartisan effort that has spanned 3 administrations. But how dangerous is it really? A candid US Army report remarks that by distancing the human from conflict, the technology lowers not only the costs and risks associated with war, but the political bar to initiating hostilities as well. As a result, the deterrent quality desired in the third offset could actually increase the likelihood that the United States would use force and ultimately decrease global stability. It adds that third offset capabilities increasingly remove the soldier from the conflict, introducing a video game-like effect into ethical decision-making that often leads to moral disengagement. Even more alarming, Georgetown University's Center for Security and Emerging Technology ran a simulation in which the US missile detection system's reliance on AI leads to hot war, potentially with nuclear weapons. They created a scenario in which the detection system interprets unusual atmospheric conditions as a series of missile launches, and the system fires interceptors in response. Then, as the interceptors reach the stratosphere, China's early warning radar picks them up. Believing they are under attack, Chinese commanders order a retaliatory strike. A technological glitch could spell disaster for humanity. This is a remarkably similar scenario to the infamous 1983 incident, when a Soviet warning system detected an incoming missile strike from the US. Soviet Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov believed the warning to be a false alarm and rejected firing nuclear weapons at the US. Thus, human intervention prevented nuclear war and saved millions of lives. In a system run by AI, the bombs would have been launched. With Eric Schmidt as a central figure of the Pentagon's new AI arms race, the US is preparing for a devastating war with China. The invention of this technology in itself creates the possibility of war, a danger that must be stopped before it evolves to threaten humanity.
Including many that Apple brilliantly integrated into the iPhone, can be traced back to government or DoD research and expenditures. Developers of Multitouch work together through a fellowship funded by the National Science Foundation and the CIA.